Chapter 10. Fluttershy let out a weak crying noise as she tried to yank her hoof back, away from the rock's surface. Much to my shock, however, the rock came with her, stretching out like some sort of organic ooze. Its texture warped and twisted as it stretched out, the large number 3 drifting down the newly formed tentacle as if it were a stream, somehow staying in the same shape. She flailed her hoof around violently while trying to back away further, but apparently reached the end limit of how far it could stretch, and it held her in place.
"Cold! It's cold!"
she exclaimed, panicking. There was no decision made, formally. A primal part of my mind just decided that she shouldn't be hurt. It was kind of unfair for it to make that suggestion without offering a plan to achieve it. I went with the only thing that came to mind. Probably idiotically, I lunged onto the cord of rock that was connected to her before any pony else processed what was even happening. There was a loud snapping noise as the elastic tension in the cord was overwhelmed and it tore away from her hoof. Of course, now it was strung across my chest in a long line. Okay, yeah, that was pretty stupid of me. Fluttershy stared in shock at her right forehoof, and my eyes widened as I saw darkened veins extending partly up her leg. What the hell were these things? That's when I felt the chilly numbness seep into my chest. Glancing down, I saw the ribbon of malformed rock slowly sink into my chest, dark veins extending out on all sides of it.
"Hold on!"
Mender shouted, suddenly colliding with my back. I had no other choice, seeing as she hooked her forelegs under mine and yanked me off the ground. We spun in midair and slammed into the limit of the cord, not unlike a kite. It felt like a frozen line of fish hooks was anchoring me, and I screamed in pain, jerking stiffly against Rainbow. Twilight snapped out of her shocked stare and looked around. Spotting the fallen shovel, she snagged hold of most of the handle with her magic and lifted it a good 3 meters into the air. Rainbow kept struggling to pull me further from the rock at the same time. Wait, how was the rock on the other end not getting yanked with us? It probably only weighed a half-dozen pounds or so. Possibly the second rash decision of the day, Twilight let out a sharp scream as her horn flared with purple light. A split second later, the shovel whipped downwards at high velocity, faster than I could follow, and I felt myself developing a new fear and respect for her. The shovel stabbed through the warped rock as if it were butter, sending a shower of sparks in every direction. Wait, if the line was elastic, wasn't it going to... Snap! A few pounds of weight collided with my chest and Rainbow suddenly found herself with no resistance whatsoever. We were violently launched backwards through the air and she spiraled, attempting to right herself as we fell towards the treetops. She managed to correct our position, but the angle of descent was too steep, and we dipped below the canopy. My lungs felt like a block of ice, and I could barely even breathe anymore. Darkness danced at the edges of my vision as I weakly watched her dodge 3 trees before kicking off a 4th to avoid crashing. Then we landed in the stream. The chilly water only magnified the already cold sensation in my chest, and I tried to scream, falling on my side as some pony dragged me out of the water. I couldn't hear anything at all and just withdrew into myself, blocking out everything I didn't need. I forced myself to calm down. I managed pained sips of air and felt it slowly spreading into my chest. Into me. Into? A light smile graced my lips as I activated my magic once again, but this time I made sure to keep it on the inside. I'm not sure if it was the panic and stress of the situation, but memories came slipping back to me, as if like a muscle memory. New trained techniques came back into my memories as my energy swept through my system, picking up what was damaged and what wasn't. The scan isolated the invading source from the good tissue, a defensive technique I never thought I'd have to use, as our enemies were a lot less subtle than that. Why take over your enemy using magic or biochemicals when simply blowing them to the consistency of strawberry pudding was a lot faster? I felt my body still and my heartbeat slow as the ward was erected inside of me, rapidly closing off the intrusion in the space of a heartbeat. It worked! Getting a better look at the intruder with scans after stopping its advance, I noticed it felt like energy, not some hostile chemical. So it was like a spell? The skin closest to the melted rock was starting to shift away. Not dissolved like it looked like at first, but shift away to where? I could still feel it, interestingly, even though it technically was no longer present. Deciding Twilight might be better to figure that one out, I decided to just get it out of me instead. Sliding my barrier along the intruder, the magic hit my skin level, and I winced, bracing myself for that familiar burning sensation. Nothing happened, however, and it just kept going, outside of my body now. Tiny symbols of light appeared on the surface of the rock, which was rapidly starting to become a rock again. Ah, crap. That would mean I needed to get it out of my chest as soon as possible. Breathing through a chunk of solidified minerals did not sound particularly easy or pleasant. Glancing up, I saw Rainbow Dash staring at the symbols now covering the outside of the rock mass in shock, seemingly unsure of what to do. Rainbow, help me pull it out. I wheezed, unable to fully inhale.
What? But it'll...
She started to protest. No, my barrier would hold and protect her. It had to. I shook my head weakly, trying not to spasm as the rock hardened in consistency. Trust me, I managed to whisper. Her eyes softened and she nodded once more before lunging. To my surprise, she grabbed the putty-like stone with her teeth in a large glob and yanked backwards with all 4 legs and her wings. I was almost pulled off my hooves, but managed to dig in and pull in the other direction. She was unbelievably strong, and I started slowly sliding across the loose dirt next to the stream, the stone on my chest barely coming out an inch. Damn it! Pain started to wash through me and I shook back and forth, pushing on the inside with my barriers. This wasn't going to work, was it? I thought about how decidedly stupid I'd been to tackle the thing. Too much of its mass was inside me now. My legs started to weaken as I ran out of oxygen to send to them. Rainbow looked frantic, pulling even harder. I didn't know what more I could do, though. Then it felt like a brick wall slammed into me. My eyes widened as my entire body became lit up with a purple glow that violently shoved me backwards. Twilight Sparkle rounded the corner into the clearing at full speed, horn radiating energy as her teeth clenched. Dash grinned into the stone as she saw the energy and yanked backwards with way more force than I could match. She had been holding back? Slowly, the rock started to pull out. Twilight skidded past Rainbow, being followed by Fluttershy and Rarity. Rarity's horn lit up as well, and I saw the stone around Dash's mouth start to glow with a light blue color. The pulling force was basically doubled as Fluttershy wrapped her forelegs around my waist from behind and started pulling backwards with her wings. The rock pulled out most of the way, leaving just the original tendril in my chest. I winced as I started to physically feel it inside my body. It needed to be outside of my body, now, preferably. Otherwise, it might take a bit more of me with it than we wanted. Twilight hesitated, and then swallowed nervously before pushing the flat of her horn into my forehead. My eyes widened, seeing her right one from less than an inch away, cheek to cheek. I wasn't sure what she was doing, until I felt the explosion of energy dance into my mind. I gasped as I was pulled inwards again, and felt a pure image of Twilight smile and nod at me.
I thought you'd count as a unicorn for this technique.
I'm going to connect my power into your magic and help you with the barrier. I don't know how to use your spell, so you direct us.
She spoke gently, directly, into my thoughts. I suddenly realized I had no idea how to speak back. Her energy flowed like a waterfall all around me. I hadn't really comprehended how powerful Twilight was before. If I possessed roughly a bucket of power, she was more like a lake. It was overwhelming, but it also felt, well, like her. I felt the flush under my cheeks outside on my body, but I couldn't shake the feeling, starting to get giddy suddenly.
Mender, please, focus!
She pleaded, causing me to shudder. I fought through the liquid pool of heat my mind was becoming and shifted my attention down to the barriers my magic had made. She noticed them the instant I pushed on them a little and watched me carefully. There was a sense of extreme curiosity as she watched as I activated the pushing effect again. Seemingly understanding, I felt a nod from her, and all of the energy rushed towards the barrier like a tsunami. My eyes widened as I was washed out of the way, flailing. The popping noise was very audible. Rainbow smashed into Rarity, who stumbled but caught her. She immediately spat the large rock out of her mouth and sent it hurtling into the tree to my left with a kick of her hind leg. I landed on Fluttershy, who tipped over with me, causing both of us to land in the stream. Struggling to get my weight off of her, we both splashed onto the bank a few seconds later, her shivering and me trying to hack up my newly liberated lungs. Twilight rushed over, looking terrified, and slid into range before carefully feeling along my chest, testing each rib.
Are you all right?
She asked. I saw her hoof shaking a little. Rarity and Rainbow walked over after her, both of them looking tired, though I wasn't sure why Rarity looked tired. She had been resting for the past 40 minutes. I nodded weakly to Twilight, smiling momentarily before coughing again. My lungs felt raw. I wondered how much internal damage there was. My magic was too low to run a scan at this point. Chances are, as it hadn't solidified inside me, I'd just have some bruising and chest pain for a few days. Hopefully. I'll be alright. Ow. Though, I think Fluttershy and I should stay away from streams from now on. How's your hoof? I asked, turning to the drenched yellow Pegasus who had just helped save my life. Twilight snapped to attention, seemingly remembering Fluttershy's hoof when I said something. Both of us looked down at the bruised appendage as she sat there, shaking. The veins had gone down considerably, and it looked like only a couple of blood vessels had burst. She was going to be fine. She couldn't seem to stop shaking, though. I frowned, looking back up into her face to notice she looked like she was about to cry.
Thank you. You saved me.
She stuttered out, hiccuping lightly before performing a gentle pounce. Getting knocked over, we both fell into Twilight instead. Blushing, I did my best to reassuringly hug her now crying form, as Twilight smiled sympathetically at her. Okay, think platonic thoughts, Mender.
I don't blame her. That was scary,
Twilight added, hugging Fluttershy around me. Scary? That didn't even begin to describe it. What were those things? I don't think they were quite what they looked like. They had something to do with my arrival here, I had a sneaking suspicion. Rarity snickered politely. Rainbow grinned, however, and pounced on Fluttershy from the other direction, squishing her between the three of us. She looked up from my shoulder and smiled at both Twilight and Rainbow, sniffing and trying to wipe her eyes.
Thank you, every pony.
She thanked, blushing and seemingly unable to stop crying. Rarity gently sat down beside Twilight, pulled out a handkerchief, and used it to wipe Fluttershy's eyes. A twinge went through me, as I suddenly felt warm and content again. Maybe Twilight was right. Friendship, huh?
Something tells me those aren't actually rocks.
Twilight muttered sarcastically a few seconds later. Today wasn't a good day for keeping secrets, that's for sure. We had pooled our picnic resources after getting back to the crater. Spike was just waking up, yawning and looking around as we walked into the clearing. He freaked out a bit at first as to why he was alone, but was rapidly placated at the sight of Rarity, apparently. It didn't take a master of psychology or behaviorisms to note the massive infatuation he had for her. Pity, it appeared to largely be one-sided, as Rarity just gave him a polite smile before settling down on half the couch again. Regardless, I knew what was coming before we'd even reached the crater. Settling down in a vague semblance of a circle, we got onto the large blanket. It was grill the alien time, I'd guessed. Hopefully not literally grill. Rarity sat opposite of me, and Raymadash fluttered once before flopping next to her at the base of the couch with a light roll. She came out of it with a smirk and tucked up, looking surprisingly comfortable, rainbow mane spread wildly. Fluttershy descended much more gently and landed off to my left, a few feet away before tucking herself up. Her legs crossed gently in the back as she slid onto her side and gave me a shy smile. Dragging my eyes barely away from her, I glanced up to my right when something gently bumped into me. I flushed as I realized that Twilight's rump was momentarily pointed right in my direction as she rotated once. Completing her turn, she settled down directly to my right, barely an inch from me, much to my surprise. Of course, she'd been giving me concerned looks the entire way back, so I had the feeling she was just trying to keep a close eye on me. Her notebook was out an instant later as she flipped over the freshly taken notes.
All right, enough small talk.
Rainbow declared, looking over at me, eyes energetically dancing and a smirk spreading across her face.
No pony was talking, Dash.
Fluttershy pointed out. She tried to anyway, but she was silenced when Rainbow raised a hoof to her and nodded.
No, don't get technical with me. Spill it, Moonmender. You know weird magic and seem to have something to do with those rocks.
She ordered, staring right at me.
Relax, Rainbow. It's up to him how much he wants to say.
Twilight reminded, not looking up from her notes. Fluttershy nodded along politely in agreement, adding,
Yeah, right. Just tell us what you feel comfortable with.
I gave her a smile. She was so kind. I couldn't imagine disliking her. Giving her a nod in return, I turned to look back at the center of the blanket. You all deserve an explanation after all that. You probably saved my life, I accepted, frowning slightly. Spike slid into the center of the blanket with both baskets and started carefully unpacking lunch, as I started in with an extended version of the story. They'd all heard most of it already, minus the not-so-normal parts, so I was able to skip over quite a bit. Rarity listened with interest, already knowing that I wasn't a native, but still apparently curious about the specifics. Fluttershy also listened politely, but her eyes kept getting bigger and more shocked as she realized what my story truly entailed. Rainbow looked skeptical, at best, for the first half of the story, and it wasn't until Twilight started confirming and explaining the things in her notes about my memory that she actually started to look surprised. Much to my horror, her surprise shifted steadily to a rabid excitement the longer I droned on. I skipped the gory details in my memory and just covered the basics. What I knew of my old world, what I remembered, my pathetic level of magic, and the profession I thought I had been. It was a lot easier and shorter to give them what I did remember, rather than try and deduce what I didn't. Spike finished laying out a very delicious-looking picnic lunch by the time I concluded the story, and I had to admit that the diet was starting to grow on me. His body was more akin to a temple with how I took care of it now, and it felt pretty good. Of course, given that comparison, I had the feeling that if this body was a temple, my old one was a run-down one-bedroom, half-bath apartment in the seedy neighborhood. Military MREs were probably some of the healthiest I ate.
For real? You're from a different world.
Ramadash asked after a few seconds, sparkles almost dancing in her eyes as she grinned at me. Spike held back a snicker as he rapidly started putting a sandwich together.
Really? Were you listening at all, Rainbow?
Twilight asked bluntly, with a hint of dripping snark. Fluttershy moved up closer to the food and started gently putting together a salad, mindful of her bruised hoof. Her surprise seemed to have faded, and she was oddly accepting for some reason. I sighed weakly, wishing I could find somewhere to curl up and hide. It's not that special. Where I'm from doesn't exist anymore, and it wasn't really a pleasant place anyway. I just want to stay here, I muttered, frowning as I considered it. Yeah, this place is infinitely better, no doubt about that.
That's not a bad thing, right? I mean, you're perfectly welcome here. And if where you're from is such a bad place, then really it's an easy choice.
Fluttershy agreed quietly, smiling at me as if to try and cheer me up. I nodded reassuringly at her, glad she was talking to me again. No arguments here. Though I don't think I have much of a choice in the matter. Not that I'm complaining, I added, snickering to myself.
Well, that's simply nonsense. We have Twilight here, a very accomplished user of magic. If any pony short of the princesses could Gensu back, it's her,
Rarity assured, sounding quite proud of Twilight. Was she not listening to the no longer existing part? Well, I had kind of glazed over it a little bit. Maybe they thought I was speaking metaphorically. Twilight shook her head.
Well, I thank you for the vote of confidence, Rarity, but I don't think that's workable,
she explained, frowning. Nice wording. She floated several sandwich ingredients up with her horn and started putting them together. I idly wondered why Rarity hadn't done the same yet, but decided I was getting off track. I'd simply wanted to spare them the details, but I had a distinct desire suddenly to spare Twilight's reputation instead. She's probably fully capable of sending me back. From what I've seen, she's got an awe-inspiring amount of power, and a brilliant mind to boot. She's not the problem. I spoke up, trying to redirect them before any pony else questioned her. Twilight seemed surprised, and I saw a soft pink tint to her cheeks from here. Rainbow seemed to be losing interest and tackled one of the chip bags.
Oh? Then what is?
Fluttershy asked quietly, a sudden hint of concern in her voice. Spike eyed up one of the sandwiches before looking up.
He doesn't have a home to go back to, like you said. Those big, mean baddies blew the whole planet up,
he exclaimed, with a certain oddly placed level of excitement. He emphasized the blowing up part with his arms extending out dramatically and a whoosh noise.
Spike!
Twilight scolded, glaring at him over her notes. Fluttershy let out a stifled gasping noise to my left and scooted closer with a flap of her wings. I winced as I saw her salad bowl rock, but relaxed as it stabilized.
That's terrible. I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say. How are you coping?
She asked, looking more worried than I'd seen her before. The question caught me off guard, and I frowned. Rainbow sighed and shook her head.
I didn't realize any pony could be so cruel. That's just evil,
she agreed, sounding a bit disenchanted to the topic. She seemed to take it out on the paper chip bag, utterly destroying the top of it to get to the crunchy goodness inside. They were monsters of hatred given flesh. They wanted to eradicate all life that wasn't them. And from what I recalled, they had done just that for 100,000 years before my people even saw their planet from orbit. We were totally outclassed from the start. But how was I coping? The concept felt foreign to me. Nobody had said I could stop moving long enough to mourn before now. How did one get over the loss of their entire species? I was all that was left. And I was a pony now. Didn't that mean that my entire species was extinct now? The question was inescapable, and it felt entirely too large for me to manage. What now? I was in a new place, a new body. I had nothing else. My head spun, and I suddenly felt very small and alone.
Mender? Are you alright?
Fluttershy asked, looking up at me at an angle, peeking under my lowered head. I snapped out of it with a start and sighed. Sorry. It's easy to get lost in my head. Sometimes I just feel a little lost. And very small. I apologized, looking back at the center of the blanket. And zone out a lot, but that was obvious.
Hey, anybody here would feel the same if they were in your shoes.
Rainbow concurred, giving an assuring nod. She then offered me a chip.
Not helping, Dash.
Twilight groaned, shaking her head next to me. The blue Pegasus shot her an annoyed scowl before retracting the chip and violently crushing it in her mouth. Well, she's right. You ponies have been really helpful so far. Without you, I trailed off, realizing it fully finally. I owed every pony here quite a debt. But they said they were my friends. Does that mean I pay them back with friendship, then? Fluttershy giggled and shook her head.
You're a kind stallion and a good friend, right? We're happy to help,
She assured, her wing gently extending on her left side, and I was momentarily mesmerized watching her scoop up her salad bowl with it and move it in front of her. Twilight nodded in agreement next to me, snapping me out of it.
She's right. Friendship's taught me a lot since I came here. Some things are a lot harder without it, and other things are just straight up impossible without it.
She added. Her attention shifted back to the sandwich in front of her, and she took a greedy bite. Regardless, I suddenly got the impression that things with the elements of harmony were a bit more complex than I had realized. Nurse Red Art had made it sound like some sort of storybook fantasy. Both Rarity and Rainbow Dash perked up, nodding towards me. Kindness, generosity, loyalty, and magic were present. I suddenly felt a little awkward. Weren't these mares basically heroines? I was just a lone newcomer. The only thing different from me was my history and penchant for incredibly bad luck, it seemed. I think I'm gonna need to find work soon, I muttered absently, frowning, before adding, to be less of a burden on every pony anyway. Fluttershy looked perplexed, but Twilight seemingly followed my cognitive jump.
You're still worried about room and board, aren't you?
She asked softly, resting her head on her legs and looking up at me, her sandwich readjusting in her new position. All of this food was theirs too, now that I thought about it. There was no denying it. I really do appreciate all of the help you guys have given me, but I feel terrible with all the attention. I mean, you're the elements of harmony for crying out loud, and I'm just some stranger without a memory to his name, I admitted, feeling minutely better for getting it out, but still insecure. I wonder where it came from. It had bothered me at first, but now I barely noticed it. I was slowly developing personality traits over the time I spent here. For example, I now knew for a fact that I was incredibly uncomfortable with accepting the generosity of others. Coupled with some remarkable bad luck, my tendency to jump to conclusions, and my annoying habit of acting before I thought something through, and I seemed to be rapidly setting myself up for disaster. I wondered how accurate I was to my pre-amnesia self. There was silence for a little bit before Twilight finally sighed.
We don't think we're all that special, really,
She explained, and I could almost see her mulling over the words in her head.
Well, Twilight's awesome with magic, and I'm totally the best flyer in Equestria, so in a way you're pretty lucky,
Rambodash interrupted, winking playfully but causing me to flinch and bury my muzzle in my front legs. Her grin switched to a puzzled look. Rarity gave her a scornful look.
While I admit to being quite capable of designing simply fabulous outfits, I think what Twilight is trying to imply is that we don't look down on the less fortunate.
She started. She seemed to realize what she was saying and trailed off, covering her mouth lightly with her forehoof. Well, I was definitely less fortunate, regardless of her desire to be diplomatic.
For crying out loud,
Twilight muttered, lightly slapping her forehead beneath her horn.
That did not come out right. I'm dreadfully sorry.
Rarity apologized, giving a soft but mortified look. Fluttershy giggled softly at my expression, and I buried my entire face instead.
Relax. What they meant was, you're our friend, honest and true. We met by pure chance, but we each like you for our own reasons.
She enlightened. I felt 2 hooves on each shoulder, giving me a soft, encouraging massage. I was then distinctly aware of how sore and knotted my shoulders were. I peeked out of my hiding spot, but was surprised to find only one of Fluttershy's hooves was occupied. That meant... Glancing to my right, I saw Twilight was also lending a hoof to my massage.
She's right. And we're not perfect. We all have wants and wishes. And if you paid attention, you might have noticed some ponies are taking as much away from interactions with you as you think you receive.
She reasoned, gesturing towards her notes with her right, unused hoof. Her sandwich drifted, seemingly forgotten for the moment. Huh? Oh yeah, she studied magic, and as I caused quite an anomaly when I arrived, of course she stood to benefit from the new data. Rarity scoffed and I started, looking back towards her.
Surely you value his conversational etiquette as well. He is very polite and truly honest in discussion. Simply a pleasure to converse with,
She added, earning a sudden blush from me.
Wasn't he just beneath you?
Rainbow asked dryly, giving her a scrutinizing stare. Was Rarity trying to save face then? That had sounded a bit over the top.
Well, I never. You were the one who made the poor fellow feel terrible over his lack of wings or a horn.
She shot back, starting a glaring duel. Fluttershy gasped quietly at their antics and tried to interrupt them.
But Earth ponies are really strong and hardy. That's special too.
Sadly, she was so quiet that I doubt they heard her. Not that I had strong or hardy going for me either. Maybe my special talent is bad luck, I mused, snickering quietly to myself. I wondered what that would look like as a cutie mark.
Oh, please. You made it sound like a bad thing when it's totally awesome and you know it. I wasn't trying to hurt his feelings,
Dash bickered back. Rarity didn't look amused.
It's hardly awesome for him,
she returned. I winced again. It was true, though. But I didn't really feel the need to be like them, so much as simply be useful. My mind wandered back to Twilight's earlier comment. I had a want too, didn't I? My memories. The more I could get back, the better. I might not like the pony or person I was back then, but just having the knowledge would be nice. Even if I didn't like the old me, it wasn't like just knowing about it would turn me into him again, right?
Girls, knock it off. We still need to figure out what to do with the rocks.
Twilight suddenly shouted over the two of them, causing me to almost pee myself being right next to her. She angrily chomped on her sandwich after finishing. Fluttershy was nibbling politely at her salad, watching the two friends bicker. Rarity and Rainbow glared at each other for a long moment before the latter broke away and looked over to Twilight.
Could we not simply bury them again?
She offered, flipping her well-styled purple mane back again, as if shaking away the previous anger. Spike further disarmed the irritation in her by regally offering the sandwich he finished preparing. She gracefully nodded towards him before accepting it.
Oh no! The worms or bugs might get hurt if they touch them!
Fluttershy protested, looking worried and interrupting her munching.
She's right. And besides, if any pony else found them, they wouldn't have any way to defend themselves from it.
Twilight agreed, thoroughly shooting down the idea. Rainbow Dash rolled her eyes and huffed out.
I say Mender puts those symbol thingies on them and then I rain boom them into orbit.
She emphasized the point by launching a chip almost straight up before catching it with her mouth. I chuckled at the mental images, but shook my head. That would only work if I touched them again. My magic's stuck inside my body, I informed.
Stuck?
Fluttershy asked, resuming her dainty eating.
He doesn't have a horn to channel it outside his body with, like a unicorn. I wish I knew those spells.
Twilight added, before I could reply. I raised an eyebrow at her. Didn't you see how from my memory? I questioned, distinctly recalling her blundering upon all the symbols I had used. Now I'm happy she did.
No, they're your memories. It was kind of like trying to read a book while the wind was blowing my pages along. You're the one who has them memorized,
she explained after swallowing the bite I caught her in the middle of. I thought about it for a moment. Well, you could take another peek if you wanted, I offered, secretly hoping she would agree. She'd get more data, and I'd get more memories back. It was a win-win. Twilight looked honestly surprised for a few moments before smiling.
After what happened the first time, you'd let me try that again?
She asked, sounding unsure. Rarity interrupted my gentle nodding with,
The first time?
Twilight acquired a faint blush and glanced over at her now gracefully smiling, if not somewhat knowing expression.
I might have been a bit too eager to try out the new magic. There were memories I shouldn't have touched upon, which really should have been left to his privacy. And I shouldn't have been so forceful or invasive, and I should have explained it more before getting started. And of course...
She started. It was like a slow-motion train wreck. I watched her explanation derail and slide downhill into a mortified lamentation of sorts. Twilight, stop it. It's all right, I affirmed, this time placing a hoof on her shoulder instead. Rainbow surprised me by letting out a saucy giggle.
Oh, the good stuff. What'd you find?
She asked eagerly, grinning. Now see, I was under the impression I was getting used to blushing, but her entirely unabashed question threw me for a loop.
Dash!
Twilight berated, and I watched Fluttershy shift pink. As much as I faulted her bluntness, she had indeed diffused Twilight's self-loathing. I wondered how much of it she did on purpose. Rarity snickered softly in amusement.
While I abhor her wording on that, I must say a few details might be permissible, no?
She suggested calmly, taking another small bite of her sandwich. So she, on the other hoof, was just curious. I swallowed weakly and glanced back at Twilight for support. She stared agape at Rarity instead.
Did you like some pony back in your old world?
Fluttershy asked in a shaky, unsure voice. I froze and slowly turned to look at her, horrified. Not her too. Letting out a squeak, she momentarily looked mortified before covering her mouth and going scarlet.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. You don't have to tell us anything if you don't want.
She rapidly apologized, voice fading fast until I wasn't sure if she was even still talking. Sighing, I shook my head, losing my blush a little. There's not really much to hide, really. From what we've gathered, my world had an extremely disproportionate gender ratio. I don't think I'd ever actually met a female before coming here, I explained quietly. All three mares looked surprised, minus Twilight, of course. Rainbow, unfortunately, was the swiftest to recover. She smirked and nodded towards me.
If that's the case, I'm surprised you realized we were females at all. Whole pony thing tossed in,
she remarked, sounding amused and slowly biting down on a chip, almost as emphasis as she retained eye contact with me. I didn't at first, but I'm not naive. I muttered, blushing yet again. I was trying really hard not to look at Fluttershy. That's something I definitely didn't want to have to explain. Rainbow snickered and looked absolutely impish.
Okay. Makes sense then.
She agreed. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know, but curiosity got the better of me, and I asked, "What does?"
You ogling Twilight's flank as she turned?
She answered, giving me a wink. Yep. Shouldn't have asked.
What?
Twilight exclaimed, shifting bright crimson and looking over at me with an utterly shocked expression, her sandwich just straight up falling out of the air. I did my best to bury myself in my forelegs.
Oh, well, you really shouldn't turn like that in front of him. It's not polite in the first place.
Fluttershy spoke up, and the closest thing from her I'd heard that approximated a stern voice.
Wait, what? Is she telling the truth? But... Oh.
Twilight started stuttering in confusion, sounding extremely flustered from my hidden position. A light nuzzling sensation occurred on my left shoulder, and I shuddered, trying my hardest not to freak out and run away.
Shh. It's okay, Mender. It's not your fault. I'm sure it was an accident that she showed you that.
Fluttershy assured in a shaken but soothing voice.
Hey! I didn't intentionally show him anything!
Twilight denied, suddenly sounding miffed. Rainbow laughed, pretty much through the entire exchange, rolling around at the base of the couch when I peeked out.
Come on, this is hilarious. You should chill a little. Just take it as a compliment, Twi.
She suggested, grinning.
A compliment? That he wants to do things with me?
She asked, looking disturbed. A metaphorical boulder ran over me right about then, and I went back to hiding, wishing some pony would just mercy kill me already. Okay, so feelings for other ponies weren't working out very well. Not as well as modesty and self-esteem, it seems.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't all have smoking hot bodies like mine.
Rainbow teased, sounding deeply amused, but I definitely picked up the joking tone. Just hoping Twilight did. Fluttershy let out a tired sighing noise, and I heard nothing at all from Twilight, which struck me as a bad sign.
Relax, girls. Jeez. We're letting this get out of hoof. Surely he meant no harm by it, and you shouldn't tease him either, unless you mean to act on it, Rainbow.
Rarity chastised. Dasha looked momentarily shocked, and I tried to keep the weak chuckle in. She thought I was gross and already had her sights set on some pony else. No need to worry there. Filtering it, I added, "Don't worry. She thinks I'm gross. No need to worry about teasing me, Rarity."
Hey! You're not gross. You just know I have my sights set on,
Rainbow started, then trailed off. Her cheek suddenly lit up and she glanced over at Rarity, who gave her a raised eyebrow in turn. Well, I tried to spare her. She was just lucky Rarity hadn't seen her earlier display. If she was already out here, the cloud bank that blocked it from Ponyville and Sweet Apple Acres wouldn't have helped much. There was a long moment's hesitation as I saw Dish visibly start to fluster.
Oh, will you look at the time? I have weather duties to do. So sorry, gotta fly.
She spewed out rapidly a few seconds later.
No, wait, just a...
Was all Rarity got off before Rainbow shot into the sky, faster than the eye could follow. Several seconds passed, and then a half-consumed bag of chips landed on my head with a quiet rustling sound. At least it wasn't apples.